Good afternoon and welcome to the last session for the day and for the conference, which will be focusing on implementing the EU's non-proliferation and disarmament agenda. My name is Gustav Lindstrom. I'm the director of the EUISS, and I will be moderating this panel with four distinguished speakers. We have with us Mr. Philippe Bertoux, the Director for Strategic Affairs, Security and Disarmament at the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs in France. We have Ms. Orlaith Fitzmaurice, who is the Director for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Dublin, Ireland. We have Ms. Heike Gerstbrein, who is the Head of Unit for Common Foreign and Security Policy Operations in the Service for Foreign Policy Instruments of the European Commission in Brussels. And last but not least, we have Ms. Marjolijn van Deelen, who is the Special Envoy for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation within the European External Action Service. So we will follow the order of the speakers as just announced. Each speaker will have approximately 10 minutes. And as you have seen, there were a number of guiding questions, but we will have the opportunity now to get a sense from two representatives of EU member states. And we will also have the opportunity to get two perspectives from individuals who are within the European institutions. And hopefully we'll have a bit of time left at the end of the session for the questions that will come in through Slido. So with that very telegraphic and brief introduction, we now have just about 1 hour ahead of us, and I'm very glad to give the floor to Mr. Philippe Bertoux. Over to you, please.
Bonjour, thank you very much for this introduction, and needless to say that I'm very happy to participate in this discussion. I want to thank the Consortium for the invitation, for all the work that has been done for many, many years now. And we know that for us, it's a very important rendezvous, so very happy to participate. Hello also to the other panelists with a special welcome to Marjolijn in her new capacity. Needless to say, Marjolijn, that you have our full support. I'll cover 3 points in my presentation. First, I want, before diving into what instruments can the EU leverage, I want to give a quick overlook about the strategic environment in which we are living in. Then I'll say a couple of words on how the EU can address these challenges, and then in the short term, say a few words also about the immediate challenge that we are going to have with the REFCON, which I think will be a crucial rendezvous point next year. So I think when you look at the strategic environment, it is striking how deteriorated it has since we adopted in December 2003 our common strategy on the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, since also the new lines of action of 2008. We at that time defined some concrete measures to prevent, to deter, to halt, and where possible to eliminate proliferation programs of concern worldwide. And 12 years later, of course, this objective is still incredibly relevant. But the situation has not improved despite our efforts, quite the contrary, actually. It has deteriorated in many, many ways. Of course, we have persistent proliferation crisis. We have an erosion of the arms control architecture, and possibly next February we might find ourselves in Europe in a situation where we have no major treaty protecting or covering us. We have a permanent competition for power through military competition, through escalation of tensions, and a number of tensions and conflicts at our very borders in Europe. I'm not going to list them, but even very recently, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict happened quite very, very close to our neighborhood. So that's something that we need to take into account. I would also add that there are new risks that have appeared or have taken more prominence with new technologies blurring the lines between competition, confrontation. Security in outer space has become also an important point of preoccupation. And of course, cyber, which is a new era for competition, raw competitions often. So, the boundaries between competition, confrontation, as I mentioned, where we could, use, we could separate peacetime from wartime, have been diluted. We are facing more and more situations of gray zones where, under the guise of symmetry or hybridity, actions of influence, of nuisance, intimidation are deployed, which can degenerate at any time. So we are trying to scope these risks through the strategic compass exercise that is launched under the German presidency of the EU, and which will be finalized under the French presidency of the EU early 2022, and include, of course, in this exercise solutions. But clearly, as part of this endeavor, preserving the non-proliferation norm, engaging in negotiations, strengthening the arms control architecture, creating the conditions for complete and general disarmament are some of our key challenges that we as Europeans must face collectively. So in this context, of course, EU must remain, and European nations must remain at the forefront of this fight, with an important role to play for the EU. And so this effort must be directed for example, on the proliferation crisis. I'll start with DPRK, where we need to maintain a very firm stance considering the acceleration over the recent years of the nuclear and ballistic programs of DPRK, with the possibility of further tests of the willingness or capacity to react of the international community in the coming months. We have had very good discussions and common positions on the issue of Article 10 of the NPT on North Korea. We must keep that, of course, on the table, and we must continue to adapt to make sure that our sanctions at the international level in the UN, but also at the EU level, remain up to date, and that we can deal effectively with sanctions evasion. Second, of course, Iran, the issue of preserving Jcpoa remains, of course, a pillar of our action. We are very concerned by the actions and by Iran's measures taken since July 2019 in violation of the agreement. Of course, nuclear commitments must be fully respected. We completely trust and support IAEA's efforts in this regard to make sure that the safeguards are respected. And we maintain our concerns about the ballistic space program of Iran. So the European Union has been at the forefront on the negotiations on Iran. I myself participated in these negotiations in the past. I think the role of EEAS, of the EU, in this format remains absolutely crucial and will have to be also consolidated in the future. On the chemical weapons, we've just heard DG Arias, and for us, it's really also a source of great concern that the taboo of the use of chemical weapons has been so regularly shaken over the recent years by non-state actors and state actors in Syria, and with the more recent cases of Sergei Skripal, Alexei Navalny. I think the reaction from the EU through very strong sanctions has been one that was deserved, and we collectively need to continue our support to the OPC, to the OPCW, to the CWC, to make sure that there is no impunity and we will have a meeting point with the State Parties Conference of the CWC in a few weeks, which will be an important moment to reaffirm the support to this architecture and to the CW. On the, of course, EU export control regime is also an important part of this strategy, and the non-proliferation clause in agreements that we have with third states are extremely important tools, and the outreach efforts that we are pursuing on FMCT, on the additional protocol, or on the HCOC are also key to this strategy. That's for proliferation. For disarmament, we need to continue our work, our collective work, to promote progressive but resolute process for disarmament, for going towards a world without weapons of mass destruction. We believe that we need to pursue these efforts through a strategy including realistic and concrete steps. I'll list them very quickly. The implementation of the NPT, obviously, the entry into force as soon as possible of the CTBT, and also its network of stations. The conclusion, starting early conclusion of a negotiation on a cutoff treaty at the Conference on Disarmament, and support, of course, to the CWC, OPCW, and political BTC, the BTWC. Sorry for the acronyms in English; they come easier in French for me. So I think these are the key major points of the actions, and I'm not forgetting conventional weapons, where also we have very important negotiations. They progress at a pace that is also complicated by COVID, but they need to progress. And I'm thinking about laws about small arms and light weapons, and about the implementation of the Arms Trade Treaty, on which also the EU has an outreach program, which is very important and supported by BAFA and Expertise France. So, very quickly, these are, I think, the tête de chapitre, the key points that we need to also continue our effort. I mentioned at the beginning, and this will be my closing, that we have an immediate challenge, maybe a bit less immediate than it was a few weeks ago, because now the NPT RevCon has been postponed to August, but it's going to come very, very quickly. We really have to make sure that this conference is a success, and we need progress on the three pillars, in a balanced way. We, as France, have a special responsibility in this process because, as you know, we have since September taken the responsibility of being coordinator of the P5. So we take this responsibility very, very seriously. We will use the additional months of preparation to make sure that we, in the P5, converge on doctrines, on confidence building and transparency measures, on the reduction of strategic risks, and prior, also on the glossary, and basically on all the lines of work that we have opened in the P5 process. So we will, and we've already in the P5 contributed to the first committee by delivering common statements. I mentioned that we take this responsibility extremely seriously, but we also believe that the success of the NPT RevCon will not be only dependent upon the P5. It is a success that needs to be achieved by all the members, all the parties, and it cannot be, it will be collective. So it's, we have to be careful not to oppose the P5 to the other countries. It will be a joint success. So I will work in that in that direction. We will need a balanced results that will be, that will tackle the non-proliferation crisis in a serious way. That will devote also the space that is needed for the civilian Article 4, so the civilian applications of nuclear energy, and also which will be serious on disarmament. And here, I think it will be important to avoid polarization of debates and try to find ways and avenues to put the emphasis on what unites us rather than what divides us. So I think the EU can play an important, and can and must play an important role in this regard. If we can also pass the message to our American and Russian friends that we need a continuation of the START treaty, of the New START treaty, I think if it will be something that will have a lot of repercussions and positive effects on the atmospherics of the REFCON. But beyond that, I think it's also important for Europeans to think by themselves and to be part of the strategic reflections regarding the security and the strategic situation on our continent. The post-INF situation is also something that is of concern for us, and we cannot, remain silent and just watching what's going to be discussed or negotiated on this issue. So we have this debate in NATO for those of us who are members of NATO. We need also to have this debate within the EU, and certainly France, my country, looks forward to having these discussions in both fora, non-exclusively, and being able to articulate these discussions. Merci beaucoup. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bertoux, for your overview. I am sure that there will be questions and comments. But in the interest of time, I would like to very simply just pass the floor on now to Ms. Fitzmaurice, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gustav, and many thanks to the Consortium, and congratulations on the 10th anniversary of this event and on what's really been an excellent programme to date. I'm really excited to be speaking on this panel this morning with so many great colleagues, and really looking forward to the discussions. It's an interesting topic that you've chosen for us. I think it's really important, as Philippe has touched on, to situate the EU engagement on non-proliferation and disarmament within the broader context of the EU's common foreign and security policy, and specifically with an eye on the conflict prevention, conflict management aspect of EU's external action. The same principles that underpin the global strategy, which root the implementation of DMP objectives in a broader security policy, also are the same principles that drive the EU in its role as defender of multilateralism, and that inform what we're doing through diplomatic and financial assistance. I think it's really important to see DMP issues. Obviously, they are an end in themselves. They are a driver of security, but also they're an enabler of sustainable development, a way to reduce humanitarian need and a global public good. And I think sometimes we get stuck in our silos on DMP issues and don't necessarily see how we're contributing to the 2030 agenda or to peace and so on. Probably more than in any other areas of multilateral foreign policy, there are obviously widely divergent views amongst EU member states on key questions in relation to nuclear weapons. You have this incredibly complex jigsaw of the EU, one nuclear weapons state, a large number of NATO members, a number of military non-aligned countries who themselves or ourselves are not really a homogenous group either. And within those subsets, you find states like Ireland, like France, whose approaches to nuclear disarmament are not simply the policy choices of the current administration in office today, but they're hardwired into almost our very national identity. They're decades-old cornerstones of our foreign policies, and they're not always immediately, obviously, compatible. And then we take this really complicated jigsaw and we attach a label of CFSP and we entrust the EEAS with the task of making it all work. What really is remarkable for me on a lot of this is that very often, far more often than not, is we do succeed in agreeing a composition despite these huge divergences. It's difficult. It takes an awfully long time sometimes, but we manage it because we have that political will and that commitment to multilateralism and to the multilateral method and to hammering out the issues over and over until we find the sweet spot. And there, the NPT, I think, is a case in point, and it's one of the topics touched on in the guiding questions. It's an enormously challenging time for the review conference. I think it's fair to say that the EU, we are going to need all the extra time generated by the postponements to finesse our collective preparations. I think that's a really good opportunity for us. The EU obviously is massively committed to the NPT in this current review cycle. We have 2 EU member states having presided the PrepComs, 2 of the 3 PrepComs. The EU aims for statements in each setting, and we've managed to achieve this despite the obvious difficulties thus far in the cycle, and I very much hope that can be maintained for the review conference itself. We'll also seek to engage through council conclusions, side events, working papers on key topics that unite us, supporting the NPT presidency and the Bureau in their preparations. And I know it's sometimes been said that the EU's diversity that I've outlined shows a model for agreement across a range of perspectives. That maybe this is where this, if it's the sweet point for us, it's maybe the sweet spot for the broader NPT community. To be honest, I'm not fully certain I've ever seen that play out in practice, but I don't think it's naive to think, to be hopeful on that count, to be optimistic. Can we do more? Probably, yes. How can we do more? I think we need to be very careful in preparing for the NPT to make sure that our statements and positions are not just compromises so fragile, so delicate that we daren't touch them, we daren't approach them, we have them set and we can't go near them. But we need to make sure that they're the compromises that can truly be owned by all of the member states, that all member states are comfortable with them. And that means that then enables us or empowers us and the EEAS to see these positions as a sign of promise, as compromise with promise that we can truly get behind, that we can truly sell, and not just the lowest common denominator to avoid the ignominy of not having a statement at all. And there is the real challenge, I think, for us, and I think it's one that we're looking forward to contributing to. And of course, beyond that, within the NPT context, the EU obviously isn't the only regional grouping or cross-regional grouping that its member states partake in. There's, across most of the, Philippe has mentioned the P5 process. Ireland, for example, is a member of the New Agenda Coalition, which traditionally plays a central role in discussions around Article 6 and so on. So you have this diversity playing out in other areas as well. Stepping back from the specifics of the NPT conference, I think also there's an opportunity as we're looking at the EU Disarmament and Non-Proliferation agenda to look for further integration of those objectives across what we're doing in other parts of external action, in particular building a disarmament reflex or a non-proliferation reflex into that peace, development, security, humanitarian nexus, where there are a lot of discussions there, and I'm not sure we've been sufficiently present as a community in those discussions. It would mean enhancing dialogue on linkages between conventional arms control, conflict prevention and development, and generating ideas on how to better integrate arms control into development, prevention and peace building strategies and activities. Of course, we don't have a single overarching EU agenda on DMP. We have the WMD strategy, we have the SOL strategy, the guiding framework of the global strategy. But I think within that, we certainly have clear guidance of where it is we're hoping to go. And we probably express our intention most clearly through our support for financial initiatives ranging from CTBTO or UNGER's project on the Middle East zone or FMCT and obviously the NPT review cycle support as well, where the EU's financial support is significant and transformational. And there isn't, can't be replaced. There isn't an evident another donor in that space. And I suppose the question there then becomes, what is the relationship between financial support and influence? Are we maximizing that? Of course, that relationship shouldn't be linear. We wouldn't want it to be. That's not in the spirit of multilateralism. But nonetheless, I think we can achieve more and leverage our financial support to better influence outcomes and policy positions. And there really is a role that the EU is playing effectively as champion of the DMP regimes, as an investor in research and capacity building as a regional grouping representing all of these diverse views. Within the non-proliferation sphere specifically, I think it's worth pausing to just acknowledge the phenomenal role of the EU in the JCPOA. That's a uniquely complex piece of mini multilateralism. It addresses probably one of the most significant security challenges of the 21st century, and right at its heart is the EU. With the HRVP as coordinator of the Joint Commission, with the EU ambassador in New York regularly briefing the Security Council. That's something that doesn't happen on many other files, in not just in the DNP space, but on security issues more generally. It's extremely I think it speaks extremely highly of the EU's consistent, persistent diplomacy in that space, that we've managed to create and carve out this convening role of the EU on this hugely important file. And within the Security Council, of course, it's traditionally been an elected EU member state who assumes responsibility for facilitating 2231, thereby keeping up that strong European attachment to the file. I think maybe there's a question to be asked there in that space around now that we've seen that major success. What can we learn from it for other seemingly intractable DNP challenges? It wasn't always evident that, of course, the JCPOA is under pressure, but it wasn't always evident that we get to this point. What can we learn from that? How can we apply it? Within all of this diversity and with so many challenges, as Philippe has said, I think it's important to have a focus also on what unites us. It's no surprise, for example, that the EU does not have a common position on the TPNW. Yet there are issues that unite us on touching on nuclear disarmament. CTBT is obviously the clearest example, where the EU is a champion of this item in the Secretary General's agenda for disarmament. Commitment to multilateralism really is core. The risk of erosion of DNP and arms control agreements happens in its own context and brings its own challenges, but also it's part of a much broader challenge to the norms-based international order. The imminent change in the transatlantic context offers an opportunity for the EU to resituate multilateralism as the guiding principle. On chemical weapons, we've seen extremely worrying challenges to the norm against use, and there the EU and some key EU member states have a strong track record of united action in providing international leadership. On conventional weapons, we do see examples where even where not all EU member states are entirely aligned. For example, with regards to the Cluster Munitions Convention, we've secured a clear EU voice in support of the humanitarian objectives of the convention. And we consistently and persistently support universalization and implementation of DNP norms and standards with our partners globally. So within all this, I think it's possible for opportunities to be taken equally to look at successful mainstreaming of horizontal priorities, such as the gendered impact of weapons, equal participation of women and men, consistent with their obligations under Security Council Resolution 1325. I think there's also a really key role that the EU plays in support, and the member states play in support for civil society and being an advocate for civil society space in DNP processes. There's also a real opportunity for the EU to develop and to use a coherent and credible EU voice, distinct from that of NATO, but an EU voice in the discussions that most affect European security, especially those discussions where we're not directly at the table, like INF and New START. We're the most effective, but we're not represented. How do we collectively articulate our positions there? And Ireland placed a very strong attachment to EU unity in these domains. So in brief summary, I suppose, I think as the EU, we probably do more than we give ourselves credit for, but we're not necessarily pulling it all fully together in a single direction. We're a leading donor, we're a values-driven voice in support of multilateralism, we're a standard setter in export control, we're an advocate for diversity, we're a protector of civil society space, and we've had some remarkable successes, but unfortunately the challenges still remain. I think we look forward to working with colleagues on those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Orlaith. And I think both you and Philippe have very clearly given indications of the multitude of areas in which EU member states, the EU, are currently active. But you have also highlighted the challenge that comes with having viewpoints and positions that sometimes are hardwired from many years back. But given that we are also now talking about implementation, you have both underlined the importance of moving forward, and that right now we're benefiting from some scheduling changes, for example, with the NPT RevCon, but that we do have to be proactively engaged. So thank you very much for these two interventions. I turn now to EU colleagues, and let's begin with Ms. Gerstbrein within the foreign policy instruments. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I'm looking at my watch and I'm trying to keep myself as short as possible. So first of all, a big, huge thanks to the consortium for actually organizing this session, this conference. Congratulations also when it comes to the anniversary that you're celebrating today. I would like to highlight from the European Commission's perspective three major points today. One is our main areas of support that we are providing. The other one is how we are adapting to the challenges of COVID and our expectations going forward with our support to non-proliferation and disarmament. We all know that promoting peace is in the DNA of the European Union, and sustainable peace, we feel, can only be achieved through broad, deep, and durable international partnerships and multilateralism, as our speakers have already said earlier on. Now, in this context, support for non-proliferation and disarmament is an essential pillar of our activities under the common foreign and security policy budget. And we have been rather delighted to be able to provide year-on-year substantial support to the activities that the EU is leading in this specific context. So just to highlight a few of the building blocks from our support, I would like to point to the 54 million euros that the EU from the CFSP budget has provided to the International Atomic Energy Agency. I think it's a quite important chunk of money that has gone. And one of our key projects there has been the low enriched uranium bank located in Kazakhstan, which is under the full control of the agency. I understand that this project is now fully operational and prepared to provide the nuclear fuel to member states in case the commercial supply of low enriched uranium is disrupted. Coming to the area of chemical disarmament, we have supported the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, including with regard to its effort in Syria. And there, last year, we have provided a maximum amount of 11.6 million, which is helping to expand its lab capacities. As regards biological disarmament, we have supported the Convention on the prohibition of the development, production, and stockpiling of bacteriological and toxic weapons and their destruction. And with regard to small arms and light weapons, the EU supports a wide range of measures, as you know, both in our neighborhood and across the world, as part of our efforts to prevent violent conflicts. So as you are all over the place, so to say, politically speaking, the budget is also underpinning the efforts that you are leading on a wide and fully fledged basis, so to say. This year, COVID pandemic, we have been faced with a number of really hard repercussions. Our actions rely normally on travel, on meetings, and on workshops, but the introduction of social and travel restrictions forced our implementing agencies to find innovative and creative solutions in order to achieve their objectives under these new, very, very hard conditions. But they have done so, they have been successful. And I just name BAFA, the German Federal Office for Economic Affairs and Export Control, and Expertise France's activities when they could not organize physical on-site visits and workshops in the framework of their outreach in support of the Arms Trade Treaty. What they have done is they have carried out virtual seminars, online workshops, and webinars for officials from all of our partner countries. The support for combating the illicit trafficking of small arms survey and light weapons in the member states of the League of Arab States, implemented by Small Arms Survey, is another example of a project that has reacted proactively to the new situation and developed a range of online tools to meet its objectives. And to be honest, last not least, the fact that we are meeting today virtually and that it's working so well is still another excellent example of adaptation to the current difficult conditions. I think, so despite all of those difficulties, we have clearly shown and demonstrated our resilience and our ability to continue to deliver through our implementing partners and beneficiaries, even under these very, very challenging circumstances. And we will continue to do so, and we look forward to this with optimism. Just to give you a few examples on what this optimism is based on, the implementation of a new EU action in support of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization will start on the 1st of December. This action will focus on strengthening of the CTBTO monitoring and verification capabilities, including a number of radionuclide detection. So this, despite all of the problems we have been facing this year, will go online on the 1st of December. In mid-December, then, we will continue our support to the IAEA with an unprecedented contribution of 11.6 million, also demonstrating that despite very, very difficult circumstances, we are ready to underpin the work of the IAEA. So very clearly, we are very much committed to what we are doing and our support to non-proliferation and disarmament. And we will want to do so also in the future. While the implementation of a number of projects has been impacted by COVID during this year, our implementing partners have really gone out of their way to find innovative and creative solutions. And also the European Commission with the CFSP budget remains fully committed to supporting this very, very crucial endeavor. And I would now only look very briefly to the next financial framework, which many of you may probably know, has just been decided for 2021 to 2027. And despite the rather tight budgetary leeway that we will have under CFSP during that time frame, the European Commission stands committed and at your side to promote non-proliferation and disarmament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Heike, also for looking forward a bit. I mean, this is a long-standing commitment by the EU to the organizations that you mentioned, but also exciting to see the new project starting in December. Again, in the interest of time, I would like to turn over now to Special Envoy van Deelen, who's our last speaker, and then we'll have the remaining time for Q&A and comments. So over to you, Marjolijn.
Thank you very much, Gustav, and thanks also to the previous speakers for already covering so much ground. And if you put it all together, it's amazing how much the EU is already doing, but it's always good to discuss what more can be done. And I would especially like to thank Heike of FPI to present the financial support of the EU and our financial instruments, because they really underpin our political and diplomatic efforts. We're really trying to put our money where our mouth is, and I think that's an important factor. But also we see EU instruments developing. There's ongoing and strengthened EU defense cooperation. We have now the European Defense Fund, PESCO, the European Peace Facility. Positive effects also for the field of non-proliferation, disarmament, and arms control. so in this increasingly polarized environment that Philippe has already set out in detail, as EU, we are much stronger when operating in unity. And so our new and joint instruments are a very important factor in that. Well, since last year's conference, the same conference on non-proliferation disarmament, we've also seen a much more geopolitical European Commission come to the stage. So how can we increase our effectiveness as EU, and how can member states and the EEAS work together in fulfilling that role? Of course, many issues of security and arms control are national prerogatives, but in cooperating with the Commission, with all the EU institutions and member states, we can be much more effective. Now, of course, the pandemic has made diplomacy much more difficult than it used to be. We really need personal contact and personal engagement, and also sometimes a close, trusted environment where we can speak our minds. But nevertheless, we're continuing to reach out to partners, especially through dialogues that we have with a number of other states, many states, but also through more informal sessions. And we have many partners, both governments and non-governments. And I think this conference is a good example of it, but also we have many other ways of doing that as well. Now, you've particularly asked about new initiatives. And I think it's always good to think about new initiatives and to keep improving what we do and stepping up our activities. And we keep inventing ourselves and improving ourselves in many ways, and there's too much to list here. But one thing I'd really like to mention is the searchable online database on arms exports controls that we launched last month, which is clearly a very good proof of the transparency that we aim for as EU. And we hope that other countries will follow suit in being as transparent about their arms exports. But we've also really stepped up our support to the OPCW, given the stress that they're under, which is now explained in detail by DG EUISS. That the workload there has increased tremendously, and the need for support of the EU has increased. So we've stepped up our support for that as well. But apart from taking new initiatives and improving, it's also important to sustain long-standing efforts that we have had on many fronts. And I think the NPT is a very good case in point. Long-standing effort, support from the EU. The CTBT, there's nothing new about that, but it's important not to only go after the new things, but also to keep supporting the things that we have. And here I'd also like to highlight a very good example we have of this, which is in our small arms and light weapons engagement in the Western Balkans. That has now been going on for some 2 decades with very substantial EU funding over the years that has accumulated. We have this project with CSAC that supports the implementation of the Western Balkans roadmap against illicit arms trafficking. You may know it's been developed in the context of the Berlin process and taken on board by all Western Balkan partners. Germany and France have driven this process of the roadmap to implement these activities. And so our sustained support and the commitment by the Western Balkan partners that was fomented through these processes in the roadmap has been a very successful cocktail of aspects of initiatives. And then in addition, a couple of months ago, the latest EU firearms action plan was developed by DG Home, so by the European Commission. It also has a particular focus on the region, and the reporting and monitoring methods developed within the roadmap will be used with the help of CSAC, have now been proposed to EU member states themselves also, to help them strengthen their fight against illicit arms. So this is a very successful sustained foreign affairs project, which is even providing input to the EU's own internal and national efforts on fighting illicit arms trafficking. And it's also an example of what can be achieved if efforts by the EEAS, the Commission, Member States, the UN, and regional partners themselves are combined. And it's also a very good example of sustained ownership by the region. And ownership is very important when we develop activities. So in conclusion, maybe also for the sake of time, my message is that the EU is pushing forward on non-proliferation and disarmament matters by cooperating internally with the different institutions and lining up our instruments and programs, by working closely with member states, by reaching out to other states and staying in dialogue, no matter what the circumstances, and also by staying connected with academia through events like this, because I cannot understate how important it is for us to keep being fed with ideas out of our own little governmental bubble from civil society and especially academia. So we do too much to give you a full overview. I think previous speakers have already listed a lot, but I'm very happy to answer any questions during the Q&A sessions to go a bit deeper into specific aspects. For example, the NPT, if there's specific questions. I'll leave it at that for my introduction, Gustav. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marjolijn. Also great to hear about the activities that are being supported, that you're pushing forward now with the EEAS. It's very good to hear. And I want to thank all speakers again for their interventions. And I see now we have about, I would say 15 minutes, because I know we are already a bit behind, and then we have the closing remarks by Sibylle Bauer. So I don't want to take too much of that time, but hopefully everybody can see some of the questions that have come in via Slido. And I see that some of them are specifically for one of the panelists. So I see a question for Mr. Bertoux on how to frame a cooperative strategic approach towards Iran to assure its compliance in the Jcpoa. I see a specific question by Alex Nadal on the EU. Should it change tack and incorporate arms control objectives, for example, on cyber into its agenda? So I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I think everybody can see these questions. I would like to give everybody a moment to review them. And what I would like to do is to invite the panel to pick and choose if they would like to comment on any of these questions. And I think perhaps we can start again with the same order. So I would like to give the chance maybe to Philippe to maybe start off if you want to comment also specifically on the question that was posed to you. And then we'll take more questions if we have time, but we only have a limited amount now. Thank you. Over to you, Philippe.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the easy questions. I'll start with the first one, which has now disappeared on my screen. But I think in a way I already answered it in my presentation regarding disarmament and a call for nuclear disarmament. What our approach is completely within the framework of the NPT and NPT Article 6, general and complete disarmament. It is just impossible to take nuclear disarmament in abstraction with the rest of the strategic circumstances and parameters. So it has to be a holistic approach that encompasses all types of risks. So that's one thing. And second, we believe that to be realistic, we have to do it step by step with verification, strong verification measure. So that's why President Macron, in his speech last February, laid out a proposal, an agenda for this approach which I'm not going to spell again in detail, but I can refer you to this agenda for disarmament. And it is, we believe, a realistic, step-by-step, concrete agenda that is fully in line with our NPT obligations. Regarding the Jcpoa, I think the cooperative strategic approach towards Iran is already there, and it is clear that European members of the E3 plus, say 2 now, but hopefully 3 in the future, have done everything that was that was possible to make sure that the Jcpoa remains alive and remains the common reference on this issue. Sadly, Iran has taken some steps in violation of the Jcpoa in reaction to US steps. We hope that in the coming months, Iran will take the steps to get back to its obligations, and that we will be in a better situation to make sure that we bring back Jcpoa in full motion, and that we can also prepare building the future of our relation with Iran. Of course, with the premise that Iran fulfills fully all its obligation under be it in the NPT, with IAE, and with the Jcpoa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And very quickly, I just pass on the floor to Orlaith if there's something you want to pick up on from the questions. I see there's a new one on the CTBT on the entry into force. I don't know if somebody would like to touch on that, maybe Heike, but over to you, Orlaith, please.
Sure, thank you. On the CTBT one in particular, I think there's, normally 25 years of something is a celebration and a positive thing. 25 years here really is a quarter of a century where we haven't managed to implement what we were hoping for, and I think it's a challenge to how we handle that. Obviously, in terms of kind of overnight transformation, that's not going to be possible, but there is certainly a role, I think, particularly in the new transatlantic relationship, to encourage seeing the CTBT entry into force as an enabler of progress. If we're in a scenario where we're looking at possible extensions of New START, where we're looking at other moving parts in that picture, I think CTBT should certainly be part of that. The 20th anniversary was marked by a Security Council resolution. I'm not sure whether that's something in train for the 25th anniversary or not, but equally I think we'd be in a scenario, of course, where India as another Annex II member state will be serving on the council at that point in time, so that might add some challenges. I think the recent first committee vote on CTBT, particularly the position adopted by the United States, was extremely worrying, and there I think there is a role for us in seeking maybe to reverse that position when the resolution goes to plenary. Any attempts to undermine the norm and there's the high standards set by the CTBT for us is something that's incredibly worrying. I know that doesn't concretely deliver on entry into force, but in a scenario with new actors, with a renewed focus, maybe it is avenues for kind of trust and confidence building, and it's a signal. Obviously we're in a scenario where testing, thankfully, is not a live issue, so entry into force of the CTBT should not unduly constrain what nuclear possessor states are doing. Very briefly on the disarmament piece and on step-by-step and so on as well, I think I'd also just remind colleagues of our long-standing position that disarmament itself is an enabler of security environment, and that we don't see it as a realistic to wait for conditions to otherwise transform into a more benign or a more positive situation. That we believe progress on disarmament, including extension of New START, including preserving the gains of the INF, including implementation of Article 6 itself, can contribute to the environment that then would lead to further progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were able to touch upon quite a bit there. Very much appreciated. Heike, would there be anything that you would like to pick up on? Just let me know as you like. but the floor is yours if you'd like to make some comments, please.
Thank you very much. No, a very, very brief comment looking at the nature of the questions. I would just like to echo what Marjolijn has just said earlier on as regards the integrated approach. I think also from a political point of view, an integrated approach across the whole area of NPD would certainly benefit all of the measures that the EU is putting into place. And of course, this also relates to the financial grounds underpinning our activities. For the rest, I would just say that, of course, we stand ready as much as we can to support as we have done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. And I will now pass the floor to Marjolijn. But before I do that, Philippe, I see there's a specific question having to do with France. I don't know if you want to pick up on that very quickly before I give the floor to Marjolijn. If you don't want to, I mean, just if you just want to telegraphically say something about that before I give the floor to Marjolijn.
Which one? I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
So there's a question by Yuri Krivonos.
Yes, yeah. So Gustav, I think I answered this question.
Okay.
I answered two questions. This one and the one about Jcpoa.
Perfect. Sorry about that. The questions keep jumping up and down. So thank you. So Marjolijn, over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now, of course, the question I like best is the one by Jacek Bilica, now at the IAEA, thanking for the substantive no EU contribution to the IAEA for nuclear security. But that wasn't really a question, but I wanted to highlight it anyway. Maybe that what is now the top question of our prioritization, non-proliferation, disarmament of arms control. I'm not really sure it's a matter of prioritization. It's also a matter of definitions and of competences. Generally, we tend to think about disarmament as anything to do in the context of the NPT, Article 6, and arms control more in the realm of security policy. It's the way it's done at NATO. And I think the EU has been active in calling on resolutions of more important arms control issues, like the demise of the INF at the time, currently about calling for an extension of New START. That's what the EU does as well. But to be an actor in those areas will be much more in the sphere of NATO and individual member states than of the EU. The question also mentions cyber. There's a lot of activities, of course, on cyber going on within the in the EU. It's in different divisions. From my department, we of course look at the interface between cyber and non-proliferation and disarmament. But cyber as an instrument in itself, that's dealt with quite substantively elsewhere. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we turn our back to arms control, and it also depends on how you see arms control. Is it just in a big way in terms of weapons of mass destruction, or is arms control also containing small arms and light weapons? Yeah? The arms that actually kill people. My colleague Eran set out in two panels previously before this one. And that is an area where we are very active. Just maybe quickly on the development of a good atmosphere in the NPT and the BTWC. Maybe atmosphere is not the right word, but the EU is extremely active in trying to create space for dialogue, preferably informed and constructive dialogue. In the NPT, this is very visible in our support for the President-designate's outreach, the regional conferences that he does and the thematic seminars. These are really ways for him to engage with all states parties to the NPT. And without such a regional approach, it would be much harder for him to reach out to everyone, be physically impossible to many states parties. So by these types of very concrete support, and also many other ways, we try to really promote creating that space for dialogue, and with that improving the chance of success at these conferences. I think I'll leave it at that for now, also given the time.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the speakers for having taken a stab at these questions. I see that there are more questions coming, but unfortunately we're out of time. We need to keep to about an hour, which we have done now. So I would like to apologize to those who are not able to have their questions answered, but I do hope that at least you got some indications of those answers given the presentations and also the more recent interventions in the Q&A. And this brings me simply to just say thank you to all the speakers again. Thank you to the participants for their questions. And I think on behalf of everybody, just to thank the Consortium for another great conference. And with this, this session is over. And I want to now give the floor to Sibylle Bauer, please. Sibylle, if you're there for the closing remarks. So over to you, Sibylle. Nice to see you again.
Thank you very much, Gustav. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and dear friends, it's time to bring this conference to a close. My name is Sibylle Bauer from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and I'm now speaking to you in my capacity as current chair of the EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium. As you know, the consortium is composed of 6 European think tanks, and I would like to now put the spotlight on one of those think tanks, the Italian Institute of International Affairs in Rome. My colleagues and friends in Rome have once again done an amazing job in putting this conference together under very difficult circumstances, as you all know, which has required flexibility, it has required creativity, and it has required resilience. And you have made it work. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for your tremendous effort. And thank you for always doing so with a smile, always cheerfully, even when things get stressful. And special thanks go to Federica, to Georgia, and to Ettore, but of course also the whole team behind the scenes that is much less visible. As you know, in a virtual conference, we cannot go from 9 o'clock in the morning until midnight when the conference dinner ends, as we were all used to and hopefully will soon go back to. And also sitting in front of a screen all day is tiring, and we have the time differences. But in spite of that, what really struck me is that we were able to cover a huge range of issues, not just nuclear, chemical, biological, conventional weapons, but also a number of cross-cutting issues and emerging technologies. And all of that with a very impressive array of speakers and also of participants. And one thing the conference has also shown is the importance of dialogue and of trust building. And as we all know, trust doesn't fall from the sky. It's the result of very hard work. You need respect, empathy, listening, win-win solutions, creative problem solving, and really connecting via our shared humanity. And it is very important that the EU provides a platform for this very important dialogue. And what we also need is a healthy dose of optimism. And some of the speakers displayed that in their remarks, including Ambassador Slawinen, in spite of the very daunting task that he's facing in presiding over a fruitful NPT review conference. And I really want to end this conference on a positive note. Every year we hear that the international security environment is the worst since the end of the Cold War. We hear about the crisis of arms control, the crisis of multilateralism, the threat and fear of arms races. And we really need to get out of this downward spiral. Izumi Nakamitsu emphasized the need for fresh, creative, new thinking and for diverse perspectives. And this is really something where research, independent research, plays an important role. There was reference earlier to the 10th anniversary of the EU Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Consortium. And while in the virtual environment, it's very difficult to share a birthday cake. Maybe in the future, with 3D printing, we will be able to do that and each have our cake in front of us. But if we had such a cake, we should really share it with the EU, because the EU has been funding this effort for a decade. And I don't think that can be taken for granted. It's been really crucial. The first task of the consortium was to establish a network of independent European disarmament and non-proliferation think tanks. And we've actually just reached another very important milestone. We are now 100 members of the network, which means that we have reached 3-digit numbers. And I think this is really quite an achievement. So in addition to expanding the numbers, we have also expanded the diversity in terms of geography, because we now have members in every single EU member state, and also in 5 countries, 5 European countries that are not EU members. We've also increased the participation of the natural sciences, which is very important with the role of emerging technologies. We have more university departments. And in addition to being more interdisciplinary, we have thus also increased the focus on non-proliferation and disarmament education. And this is very important for a forward-looking constructive agenda. What we have also done is we have mainstreamed gender diversity into all our activities, and we have put a very strong focus on the next generation. At last year's conference, I was able to make reference to and share some insights from the next generation workshop that has just taken place preceding the conference. This year's next generation workshop will take place in 2 weeks. So I hope many of you will be joining. And if you're not yet registered, please send a message to the colleagues in Rome. You can use the email address from which you have received all the correspondence about the conference, which of course all of you will have. And I already know now that it will be a constructive, it will be an enlightening, and it will be a thought-provoking workshop. And that is really something that gives me hope, that we are not heading into more gloom and doom, but that we are heading into a brighter future. With that, I would like to thank all of you for participating and contributing to this conference, the participants and the speakers. I wish you a very good weekend wherever you are. And I very much hope to see all of you in Brussels next year in person. So take care of yourselves, of your loved ones, of your friends. Be safe and stay healthy. Thank you. Bye-bye. The conference is hereby closed.